ISK Legacy, we know it. We got the comments on group chat. I know we're paying attention. Now we know how we finished from 1 to 10, but more importantly, we know who's in the money and we know who finished on top. So as I've been doing for the last couple weeks, I'm not talking about the NFL in this video. As you're going to find, I have something saved for later on this week. I'll talk about that in the outro. But now I'll shut up and let's get to each of the matchups. The only kind of hiccup you're going to see after I do the matchup and I start with our 9 and 10 who didn't get a matchup this week. I'm also doing, if you remember, when I had a few drinks in the past and we met at the end of the year and I gave everyone a few words on their team, I'm incorporating that into the last video. So I do the matchup and then I do kind of your team blast from the past. How did your draft go? How did you get into this spot? Let's see how much you actually remember. I say pour a glass because I might get a little rambly, and plus I'm like 10 times funnier when you've had at least a couple drinks. Remember, that's a staple of when we met at the end of the year. So take a second, hit pause, maybe fill up a cup. Hopefully you enjoy. As mentioned, while I will be breaking down matchups, I'm also going to be talking about the teams and reminding you about the draft. This is really a learning experience for all of us. So, Rennie, you did finish 10th, and that was a tie. You both had 3 wins, but points scored went to you. So looking at your roster now, I think we can say, and we probably could have said throughout the year, you did hit the injury bug. You also had a few people that you banked on big years that just didn't really quite pan out. So you were definitely active on the moves. If we look at your roster's movement, you definitely were constantly, even weeks, if you remember, you had that massive losing streak at the beginning, but you started right away. You were trying to dig yourself out of it, being active on the waiver wire. But let's take a look at your draft, and let's be honest, you put all your eggs into the Kelsey basket. And I am certainly not one who is going to blame anyone but on-field issues. I actually think Kelsey showed for the first time that he was lost a step, but also it doesn't help when no one else in your team is catching the ball. Now, eventually as the year came on, obviously I talked about people like Rice and even Watson to an extent that started to catch, but the Chiefs underperformed majorly. 52 for a tight end. Now, he did finish as our tight end 2. Not our tight end 1. We'll get to that person in a little bit. But just the gap wasn't what it used to be. We actually did have, and whether we knew it would be this year or not, an influx of people who stayed healthy, like Kittle and TJ and Ingram, and then younger people kind of coming up, like our eventual number 1, even Njoku and McBride, Jake Ferguson. People were putting themselves on the list. The only real tight end that was a disappointment due to injury was Andrews. He did still finish as our tight end 12, but Kelsey being 2 kind of stinks. Now, if we look down at who else you spent money on, you got Burrow, who got hurt. Ayuk ended up being kind of a bit of a steal then. I mean, in this particular week, the final week, he was 5 overall, and he did make the top 10. He was our 10th best wide receiver based on our format. Akers, obviously a bust. Penny, a bust. Zay Flowers actually didn't make the top 12, but I like him, and especially being young. If this was a keeper league, I'd be hanging on to him. And Pacheco certainly still had his weeks. But if you're looking down here, your big steal was Dax. $8 for the quarterback who ended up finishing as our quarterback 4 is pretty outstanding. But other than that, it's from wet farts from your 5th pick on out. So I think that's where your issue was, whether it's people like Mike Williams who hit the IR or people like Drake London that you just never could trust because that offense was so up and down. So on a weekly basis, they were frustrating, you were underperforming, and you never really got your footing. So like I said, you made a bunch of moves, hence why your team was able to react a little bit, and you did have weeks near the end that you pushed, but especially at the quarterback position, you never really found stability outside of Dax, and that kind of cost you. I mean, we were pretty hungry for quarterbacks, so you were starting pretty much anyone you could get your hands on, and that didn't always work out for you. But you're a competitor. We know you're going to come back even stronger next year. We'll be interested to see how the tight end market fields, but sorry, pal, someone had to finish 10th. I am sorry it's you, but like I said, already on to next year. How the mighty have fallen from our 2-time auction winner back when it was called something else. The person who I'm still waiting to name something so I can get something. I mean, the trophy might not actually be worthwhile. I mean, we already smashed one of the previous league, but now that we're all in different places, but still we could say you won the something. Still waiting on it, Marco. This was a massive fall from grace, obviously, and I think you have a similar story to Rennie's with inconsistent players. Being active, this was not a complacency thing. You weren't just waiting for the league to pass you by. But if we look at your top picks, you had Bijan Robinson. Again, I think most people were wild at him at the start. I actually don't blame him, as you know, and my final rant on Arthur Smith is a coming. Garrett Wilson had a lot of value until his quarterback went out, which was right away. Devontae Adams and Pollard, you are literally talking about two people who I'm going to make reference to in another video, the final video of the year, as fantasy killers. I was huge on Pollard this year. I fell into the Pollard trap in another league. Adams, I wasn't as big on, but I mean, nobody, I don't care who you are, you can say you saw this year coming from Adams. You did not. Now, under our scoring system, though, he was our wide receiver 11, so he didn't fall completely off the table, whereas someone like Pollard, not in our top 12. If you look at, again, down, similar story, these middle rounds is where you want steals. Now, one I will identify, Mikey Evans here did have a year for you. He was our overall wide receiver 7, and for $4, that is a steal. Pittman, I would argue, not in our top 12. Oh, no, sorry, he did squeak out. He was our 12th rated receiver, so he was a steal at 5. So you did have some people here, but surrounded by people that were just inconsistent. Dallas Goedert, he was our 11th best tight end, but the only one he beat on the top 12 was Andrews, who was hurt. So out of that top 10 of tight ends that were actually active and productive, and he came on, and actually, had you made the playoffs, he did put in the last couple weeks were quite decent, but after that, you really, when you're top 4 like that in terms of financial investment, don't pan out. You could argue 5 and even 6, throw it in there. Some years are just like it, buddy. You'd rather get it all out in one year. Will you rise again to the top of the league? Wouldn't put it past you. You're already thinking of next year and bigger things. So tough luck, pal. 3 wins is about as low as you can go, I think. So we expect bigger things next year. In our battle for 7th, we had 2 people who I'm actually quite surprised finished down here. This wouldn't have surprised me if this was in the top tier. That's how tight the league was. They had winning records. They had a great week-by-week breakdown, and in any given week, they were a tough out. But like I said, I think that kind of grinds out why this league was so tight. Now, unfortunately, you both either didn't really care if you finished 7th, or you were just actually doing things holiday style, because Mozart and Sutton, or maybe you made the phone call and said, hey, you leave out a wide receiver, I'll leave out a running back, then we see who wins. Not really sure how that goes. But in this particular case, Rushke still put in a good fight. So Woody, we'll talk about you first. You didn't really have anyone that finished in our top 5 for the week. Not super surprising. I mean, Goddard did finish. He was our tight end 4 other than that. But Rice and Flowers, your young receivers, if this was a keeper, you'd be happy with those. You did leave some points on the bench. Obviously, Njoku was our tight end 2. So even there, you could have made a different start. Didn't really matter for you so much. I mean, obviously, you can go back and analyze. We'll talk about your teams in a second. But Rushke, you got to feel, Hill kind of giveth and taketh away, and as does the Dallas defense. Did not have a great performance for you. Fields did, though, making life a little more complicated as a Bears fan. He was our quarterback 4 and still playing for, maybe he's played for his job, full stop. Allen was just outside of our top 5, but DJ also outside of our top 5, but 34, that seems pretty outstanding. Actually, no, I apologize. How is that possible? He was our wide receiver 3. That's why I brought him up. Forget about me. I'm clearly just running low on fumes at the end of the year here. You could have made a few more decisions as well. You didn't need to. Kincaid actually had a great game, not in our top 5 or anything like that, but you did, you had some opportunities, and by not putting Riddler in, congratulations, because you just avoided that whole mess, although why would you? Like I said, this actually brings up some more real life issues, I think, for you in terms of the Bears looking like that. Well, they have the number 1 pick. Fields is looking like he'd be all right. Do you really want to drop him and take a chance on the next guy? Or could we maybe now see Chicago making some moves and have 2 picks in the top 10 to 15 because they're actually winning, which I don't know why they're winning. They really shouldn't be. At one point in time, they had 2 picks in the top 5. Anyway, that's a fight for another day. But to see how you kind of fared from start to finish, let's take a look at our 7th and 8th place people. I don't really need to start at this page, but just in case you wanted evidence of how hardcore he was, even as the things weren't going his way, look at that. That only brings us to October, mid-October. He still has another 30 moves to see. But Woody, to take a look at your draft a little bit here, I think the biggest thing is pretty obvious. Your running back screwed you. Eckler, Barkley, Stevenson. Collectively, you spent over half of your fantasy budget on those 3 players, and they sucked. Not one of them in the top 12 overall. A.J. Brown was a good number 1 wide receiver. He was our wide receiver 4, and I might be a little off on the numbers, bump other people I'd mentioned back down 1. I'll correct that. Jalen Hurts was our quarterback 2, so great job there. And Tua in our top 10. So you definitely were rounded out. Now, the hard part with you is I can't really take anyone at the bottom here seriously, because if we look and we just jump over to your current team, you'll notice that not all of them are still there. Now, Mozart was a fantastic job, huge pickup late. Like, let's see what round and how much you got him for. $1. He was our running back 2, showing that we all don't know anything, and fantasy football is insane. Njoku actually as well for tight end wise was a great finisher. I think a surprise for most. He was our tight end 6, but he came on at the end of the playoffs. Weirdly enough, he had a connection with Flacco, so who knew? But I think realistically, your quest the whole year was to come back from your running back hunt. And while you stole one late in the rounds, the rest of them just kept kicking you and kicking you. Your receivers as well, A.J. Brown obviously doing a great job, but then you had to resort to others that you did not draft, because most of your people here that you took a grind on, Nico Collins was a great pickup. He was probably your wide receiver steal. And that's about it. I mean, Elliott, had he stayed on your roster, one of the downsides of being an active player, though, is you're going to make a ton of moves, and he did not. Thielen as well could have been a steal for you, but you did drop him eventually. I think you used and abused him while he was decent. So, Matty, we can't really say much because, I mean, you gave it your all. I know you slid off at the end there, but you're probably paying attention to your other leagues. You're always someone who's going to be hunting for the top. You didn't miss the playoffs by much, and actually, in next year's structure, you would have made the playoffs, and I bet you would have been a tough out. So, a little bit of a disappointment that you fell as far as you did, down to 8th, but it is what it is. You'll live to play another year next year. Week in and week out, Kent, I say the same kind of thing. You're the person that no one really wants to play because you got a couple people that go off, and I think that was the definitive nature of your season. But if I had to point to one particular position, we're going to point to running back. Now let's take a look at your draft choices. Don't think you have any regret going for Hill. Now, he was our wide receiver 2, but for most of the year, he was our wide receiver 1. It wasn't until that playoff push at the end, which we will get to, that someone passed him. However, you did have our quarterback 1 in Allen, and if we did a per week, Fields would have made the top 12. He was good enough to do so, just overall points, because he missed so many weeks there. That was no bueno. In terms of other people like Steele's, DJ Moore as our wide receiver 7 kind of jumped in there. That's pretty decent. Dallas's defense, obviously defense 1. And so that's exactly what I'm talking about. You had your high-end players. Your problem was the people making up the middle ground. And we look here in your running backs, you spent $6 as your most expensive running back, and he wasn't good, right? Javonte Williams as well, not great. They had their weeks, sure, and Herbert, when he was healthy, was fine, but you didn't have running back depth, and you never really got it. So you were really depending on your quarterbacks, your defense, and Hill plus Moore, I'm going to throw in there. And when they went off, you were dominant, scoring 200 points. When they weren't, you were a fart in the wind, and unfortunately didn't work out for you. So it is what it is, pal. You did manage to come through in this last week. So 7th, just outside of that top 6 threshold. That will be more important next year. But as well, you were one of our highest scoring people per week, per week, but overall. But the inconsistency. So I'll be curious. Do you still want? I mean, that's a mentality. If you don't win, you lose. So if you're not first, you might as well be last and swing for the fences. Or next year, you're going to focus on a couple people that give your floor a little bit of a balance. Who knows what you're thinking? I mean, I'm just hoping that at some point in time in the next 20 years, you change your name. In our consolation final, we do not have a consolation prize. As you have to say, congratulations, I finished 5th. We had 2 people who made some upsets last week in the consolation side semi. Cooper being a monster, and then he kind of nicked you on this one, Jeff, unfortunately. Now, you did have Etienne, who will come up later when I do your team recap, but he was our running back 3 on the week, so bueno. Purdy, in his up and down quest, did not have his week that you kind of needed. Geno didn't fare too much better, and Stafford had an underperformance. So if I'm going to chalk up anything in this week, it's your quarterbacks that kind of led the way, and probably your receivers too, considering we got the 0 and the low total here. Timmer, you've been struggling with injuries most of the year. Mayfield, actually, I don't know if you watched the game. I had him in another league that I really needed the win to get some cash. He sucked for like all but 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden he had like 19 points because he had 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. I still don't actually mathematically get it. It's why fantasy football doesn't always make sense. So that helps you out, though. Moore took all the little receiving yards that Cooper would have gotten, so you got to be happy with that. Jefferson is your huge disappointment. We'll get to that when we talk about your league. your full year. Hall, though, was a fantasy stealer. Had you squeaked into the playoffs with someone like Hall, you could have given some people some headaches. Laporta does what Laporta has been doing, and Warren and Jones had great bounce back weeks for you. Miami's defense, obviously, not so much. Baltimore's would have been a better start, just like Achane. You could have put him in here to kind of save some of your running back issues in people like Henry. But your one quarterback system kind of ended up working out for you for the most part, but I think that had a lot to do with your draft. Hopefully next year you make it. I'm going to be as early as I can about trying to find ways that we can all be there. Drafting with someone in the league and having Yahoo Draft when it's auctioned just was not as fun. So let's make sure we try and do that. I know weekends are a premium with you, pal. Anyway, that's for another time, another day. Let's take a look at the teams that got you here. Jeff, if I'm not mistaken, this was a product of a cafe in, I believe, Oklahoma when you cut out to make sure you could make the draft. And you did a decent job here. I think a lot of your guys stuck around for most of the year. You did make a few moves, obviously, as it went on. But let's be honest, your number one person, $44 spent for about a quarter and change before his knee went all kinds of weird ways. Higgins, I think also, I mean, if you actually look at your top two, you would think you finished in the bottom, but you made some great moves. Kittle helped save you there in the tight end spot. He was overall in the season our tight end 4. Etienne had to be the person that you felt was the steal, also our running back 4 in the year, and you got him for 23, which is a bit of a deal. Devontae was supposed to have that late season, comeback that he normally does. He didn't this year. And then I think you probably have to look at your bottom part here. Stafford at 15, I'm not going to take that seriously because I think you had 15 or 18 left apparently, and you just bid because you wanted it. Same with Thomas. You could outbid because you had some money left. Brock Purdy, though, at $5. He's our top 6 quarterback overall and ended up being your best quarterback on your team in terms of rankings and overall. Stafford, when he was in and when he was healthy and the offense was rolling, his per week was quite good. So that ended up being decent for you. Someone like Monty was outside of our top 10, but was a touchdown factory for you. So you got to be happy there. So realistically, you just really needed your top 2. You got to hitch your horse or hitch your wagon to some more powerful horses, because had you had those 1 or 2 punches, I bet you win 2 or 3. I bet you get into that top end, and then all you got to do is make the playoffs and see what happens. So best of luck next year, pal. I don't really know how to address the draft because obviously you weren't there, but this was the whole point, right? You blew the wad early and often, and everyone else was $1, but Yahoo got you Warren. Achane was a huge steal. This has to go down. Look at Rennie, how much he spent for his tight end. Sam Laporta was our tight end 1 on the year, and you got him for Andala. But unfortunately, it didn't spend a lot of money on your quarterbacks, and that's just something that was haunting you all year long. In a double quarterback league or a quarterback flex, a super flex, you want to have more quarterback stability, and you could just never get it. We have a few quarterback fiends, which is great in a league that trades, but we don't seem to do that. I would hope in future years we can start making a few more deals. We seem to be too proud to try and make that deal and try and give up. You have to give up something to get something. But let's see. Who knows? It might shift the market next year. You had Breece Hall, who ended up being probably, like I said, had you gotten into the top 4, he could have been a fantasy winner. But unfortunately, Jefferson and Kupp had inconsistent seasons. Not one of them finished in the top 12 for our receivers. Now, Henry did squeak in with the running back, but he was our running back 11. That's not what you want for 30 plus bucks. Whereas Hall was our running back 5. Huge steal for you there. And I already talked about some of the deals you got later on. So you did make some moves, but I think, picking up Baker obviously ended up being your best quarterback, and he had a bit of a resurgence this year. But had you had another quarterback or two to put in a bit more of a fight, I think you could have been. You had the big horses and the big punch power. Unfortunately, again, in an auction, you went Jefferson, you went Kupp, and they didn't go where you needed them to go. But you did win the consolation, so well done in the end on having that run. And you can credit people like Breece Hall, I think, for getting you there. You still also have probably the funniest name in our entire league, so you got that. In our fight for bronze that obviously I was super invested in, it didn't quite have the punch at the end, but if you were watching, it was quite close, ... until. Some things that had to happen for Maxon to win just didn't. Number 1, McCaffrey going out. As soon as he went out, I can't explain to people that haven't been in that spot. A lot of you probably have, but McCaffrey has been automatic this year. And I was watching part of the game. I had to turn it off because if you have McCaffrey, it's one of the greatest things, to actually watch him play. When you are against McCaffrey and just hoping for him to not succeed, and literally this stinks because the only way he doesn't succeed pretty much is when he's hurt. Now, Maxon, you did have, Najee Harris pick up the slack for you a little bit there and put in a good performance. You had Taylor actually get you 20 points. I mean, he was your highest end quarterback of the week. But then you needed more support from your wide receivers. And as I think I said earlier on in the season, as Chase giveth, Chase taketh away, you made all the right calls though, as opposed to me, who pretty much made all the wrong ones. I made a couple decent ones, but other than that, I mean, I did put in Stidham at quarterback, which I was pumped about. Browning would have been a better call, though. Left Ford out because I thought, hey, Cook's been cooking and White's fantastic. I'll get to some of their rankings as we go on, but you know what? Ford would have been better. Same with Walker. So it's nice that I had a deep team, but let's be honest. Sometimes you win because your team's floor is fantastic. Sometimes you win because your big guys show up and they score a lot of points. Now, St. Brown put up a bunch for me. Likely was our tight end 3. Cleveland was our defense 5. But I was Lamar or bust. I didn't even know. He was not just the highest scoring quarterback. He was the highest scoring quarterback by at least, I think, 10 points, which is quite big for our quarterback spot. And he actually could have had a 6th touchdown. They took him out, and the backup Huntley threw one. So good for me. Bronze medal, I think 2nd year in a row. The last year was the weird tie situation where we had the injury, and then we got all weird about it because, if you remember, you know what I'm talking about. So I was the bridesmaid. Who knows? Got bumped out, I'm pretty sure, by the same person last year. So it is what it is. Maxon, you had that up and downs run. If it wasn't against me, I would have been cheering for you. I appreciate, by the way, all the support. I do recognize you as probably the most active on the, liking, saying comments on the videos. I read all of them eventually. So thank you, sir. You deserved the cash on this one, but maybe you're just saving up your chips for next year. But to take a look at how the draft went and how things went throughout the year, let's take a quick look at our number 3 and number 4. This is super fitting, actually, right? You had a great team, and we look at where you spent your money. All right, you invested on 2 people that you wanted to be your Rockets. One was definitely a Rocket. McCaffrey, not surprisingly, was by far our running back 1 in the entire season. Chase was a huge disappointment, but just swung big, and it was what it was, right? If you take a look at some of the people you got for more bargain basement deals, I know you overspent on Dylan just because you wanted the running back. He didn't work out for you, nor did the Lizard. Addison, though, at $2, I'd categorize that as a steal. But obviously you had Richardson and per game, great, but didn't play that many games. Cousins, same, was actually getting you tons of points. Then he gets hurt. So if you actually look at it, you had a very dangerous team. You just got bit at the wrong time by the wrong people. Najee, you probably spent a bit more on, but did have a good couple weeks at the end. And Waller getting hurt probably didn't help your cause as much either. So actually, if you look at it, things could have been a lot worse because you certainly did not get a lot of luck. You had to earn everything that you got this year. Chase and Lockett being inconsistent really did suck for you, but you were active. You were picking people up and making moves. San Fran's defense was a solid defense for you all year long. So like I said, you took a bad situation and having some really talented people go down early. You made it the best you could. You almost squeaked some cash out for it. So you proved again, it's not just the draft, it's what you do with it. So congrats, sir. Sorry it didn't work out in the end. There is nothing more boring than someone talking about their own team, but you've all heard me do it so many times. For me, I think I did that bit where I had a lot of money to spend near the end, and I got the people that I wanted. I thought St. Brown would have a good year. He did. He was our wide receiver 3. I didn't really want Walker. Actually, I remember that being a bid up situation, so I'm going to leave him off. I thought Olave would have a breakout year. He didn't. Now, wasn't horrible, but he wasn't in our top 12, so that's not someone you want to spend $20 on. Lamar, though, huge. Quarterback 3. I was big on him. Also big on Lawrence. He was not a top 12 quarterback. So for me, it was hit or miss. I just made a lot of moves at the right times. I lucked out with people like, Cook, White. I got them for super cheap. They ended up being top 12, Cook at 10, and White at 6. So those are kind of steals. Kamara, I knew I had to put him on the bench for a bunch of weeks. He still made it in, though. He was our running back 9. So I got depth eventually, and I made the best of situations, but it's why I had a little bit more of an erratic play. It's why I had to go fishing for some people occasionally. It's why I had Hill at my tight end for a while until I got this gentleman Likely in the mix. So lesson learned in some cases, but I still at the same point, you got to take some big swings. Some of mine hit, some of mine were whiffs. But I once again walk with a bronze. It could be worse. So many times we have finals that are just like wet farts because the people that get you to the final aren't always people that do amazing in the final. This is what you want, though. Both of these people were our top 2 scoring of the week. I didn't include the 9 and 10. I didn't look up your numbers, but I got to think you didn't touch this. So if we're going to have it go down like this, you want to have it go down in a way that makes us feel great, that the final was at least earned. No one does that annoying thing. Be like, if I was in the final, I would have won, which I have done several times when I can. So congratulations. Connor Seamus, you fell up short again. This is, I think, your second place in a row. So hey, that's better than not. Gene the Machine, you were our number one. You took the division title at the end of this regular season, and you kept the ball rolling all the way through. Would have been cool if you pushed 200, so try better next time in the final. How did it go down? I'll start with our silver medalist first. I mean, Paka Nakua has to be someone that's going to come up a little bit later on when I talk about steals and deals of the year. He had a great performance for you. Buffalo's defense was the third highest scoring. CeeDee Lamb, though, heard of him. Wide receiver 1 this week. Well done, sir. And I think just the rest, you're once again just someone who doesn't always have as many in the top 5. But even look at your bench. You had people that just put in double digits. And when you do it consistently, you get there. Now, unfortunately for you, Gibbs had a down week. Zamir White would have been a better start, but that would have been a super gutsy play had that gone on. And realistically, wouldn't have quite have been enough. Gene, Joey freaking Flacco. Unbelievable. And I had him quickly because I thought it was funny. And I still said if I won, I would have bought the jersey. I should have kept him because maybe I would have freaking won. Unreal. Flacco is our quarterback 3 on the year and pretty much the postseason MVP. Jacksonville's defense, great start there. Our defense 2. Mixon putting up good numbers. Same with Taylor. But Williams is your guy. He was the running back 2 this week. Reed was your wide receiver 4 this week, or the wide receiver 4 this week. We did have a few people go off, as we've seen, so that was more than enough. Now, you did have a few points on your bench, but come on, if you would have put in Derek Carr, I would have actually had to derail the system and make it that you didn't win. So you made most of the right choices. I'll say pretty much all of the right choices. Would have been nice if we could have squeaked out 2.4 more points just to say you pushed 2 on the final, but doesn't matter, pal. You are a league champion. Now let's take a slightly closer look to both your teams and what got you there. Connor and Seamus, it only feels like yesterday that you had the earphones in. Clearly, you're running a game room. That was pretty fantastic. You got most of the players that you're really looking for. And if you look, you did make a ton of moves, but I feel like the heart of your team stayed the same with the one noted obsession, Paka Nakua, pickup of the year. He was the wide receiver 5 on the season to pick him up. And I mean, that includes probably the weeks that you didn't start him, but still made up for the fact that you overspent on Diggs, sadly. Now, I wouldn't say overspent because obviously you needed to pay that to get him, but he ended up being our wide receiver 10, so not really what you were looking for. And I want small correction. I apologize. Maxon Chase was actually the wide receiver 9. My bad. Gibbs, though, had a good year, just maybe not a last finish. So 22 is actually a steal on him. He was our running back 8, but CeeDee freaking Lamb. Now, I think we all knew he was going to be good this year, but if you're going to go ahead and say you thought he'd be the wide receiver 1, I mean, if you did, congratulations, because not everyone thought that way. I think even as the season went on, people were questioning Dallas's offense. There's so many mouths to feed. Is Dax can be consistent? The answer is CeeDee Lamb is awesome, and he was the number one wide receiver of the year. And considering the start that Tyreek Hill got into, pretty crazy. If the Dallas Cowboys really do play the entire game against Washington, because the win could help them out, he could get to the mark that Hill wanted for himself. He did a phenomenal job. I think it's got to be said, your biggest disappointment, definitely you strapped your wagon onto, or your horses. I keep using the horses and wagon thing and I keep screwing it up. Patrick Mahomes did not play well this year. He was obviously a great quarterback in previous years. He was our quarterback 7, but he didn't get you where you needed to go. Andrew's getting hurt so early also was kind of a ding. But if we take a look downstairs, now you didn't keep Jordan Love. Had you kept Jordan Love, Love was actually the quarterback 5 in our scoring system this year, which is pretty crazy. So that would have been the one maybe you didn't want to drop. Even Wilson, though, not playing that last game, he was still the quarterback 12. So he's not a great actual quarterback, but he seems like a decent fantasy one. Ridley and Judy were definitely wide receivers that didn't bear you well. But like I said, you were always so active that if you take a look at your team, the essence is there, but you changed all the pieces around when it didn't fit. Picking up someone like Pittman, who just squeaked into the top 12, benching the people you need to bench. picking up the defenses that needed to get you there. Buffalo ended up being the number 5 defense for us, which is always nice to have some extra points when you need it. So between Mahomes and Bijan, I already had my speech ready for why you were disappointing, but you weren't, because you made so many great moves and CD was that awesome. So you did an awesome job. Maybe if those two just have a little stronger last weeks, maybe you put a better fight. Maybe this is a different medal for you. But hey, I think everyone but one person would trade spots with you with the silver medal. So congratulations, gentlemen. Speaking of the only person who would not trade spots, our league champion, our only other league champion, who's not named Marco. Congratulations, Gene, and you did it all on your own. Now, you definitely did it through an active market. Let's take a look at your draft quickly. Josh Jacobs, by most standards, massive disappointment, wasn't in our top 12. Jonathan Taylor, you know you were taking a gamble on him because he wasn't going to be healthy for the first little while. Jalen Waddle had his chance to have a breakout year and just didn't. Herbert, here's the shocker, not in our top 12 quarterbacks, was supposed to have this monster year. So your top 4 in terms of the amount of money you spend were busts, and yet you won this freaking league. How'd you do so? I mean, it was moved. We can look at your draft because you kept some of these people. I mean, TJ Hawkinson was great for you. He was actually the tight end 1 until about 4 weeks ago, and then he got passed, but he ended up being our tight end 3 on the year. Keenan Allen made the top 12. He was actually the wide receiver, I think, 6 when we go through things. But other than that, just take a look at that. Take the little screenshot in your head. Now take a look who's there. Granted, you had Jonathan Taylor still on your team, and he did well in the final. You still had Mixon, but picking up people like you started 0 of the quarterbacks that you actually drafted. Williams was the running back pickup of the year, not drafted. Taken afterwards, running back 3. Great move, great waiver wire pickup on that front. Your tight end, you had to get creative because TJ obviously got hurt. You weren't scared of putting anyone on your team, even Derek Carr. So congrats. I think Jacksonville's the defense you finished with, but they actually were they were number 2 on the year, but they were number 12. So they actually were a top 12 defense in this league. Debo, as well, as someone you got for fairly cheap, but put up a decent fight, and definitely the weeks that he went off paid off in dividends, and his per week of starts, his points per week were quite high. So we can ramble on about how awesome you are, and I know you'd love to hear it, but you are a top scoring person, if I'm not mistaken, number 1 in the regular season, and you took home the crown. So congrats, Gene. Triple crown all the way through. Okay, ISK Legacy, that's it. That's all. League wrapped up. Like I said, though, this is not the last that you might hear from me now, especially for those who have been watching all the videos. And again, I can see the people who signed on. Thank you for those who subscribed and who leave nice comments. That's fantastic. I see a few of you, and I do get notifications. But I got to say, League All-Star this year. Yes, I know some people, Gene, Connor, and Marco. I see you on the group chat. I see you on the WhatsApp chat. Maxon, you are our MVP. Love the comments. I mentioned it in the video already, but thanks, sir. I appreciate it. And tell you what, I'll throw it down right now. If anyone's still watching this, you can hold me to it. March Madness, in your honor. If ISU makes it, I'm taking them at least a round. I don't care who they're playing. God, I hope they're not in a game that I really like the other team. That's a dumb thing to throw. I'm throwing it out anyway. It's happening. Now, in terms of the videos, this is the wrap up for ISK Legacy. You know, I have a couple leagues I've been doing this with. So I'm going to do a wrap up for all of fantasy. I'm going to try and have that out by the end of the week. Being a little ambitious with how I'm trying to roll it out. So let's see how it happens. In my head, it's going to be great. And I've been loving doing some of the research for it. So we'll see how it goes. But in the meantime, I will be in touch for anyone who A, still owes me money, or B, who now I owe money to. But in the meantime, folks, hopefully we can catch up soon. Hopefully you enjoyed these videos, and hope to see you all next year.